give us the proof, because we need to know who is building what. Because when contracts are awarded, when that government is successful, because we have seen, for example, in the last election, I mean, you really have to be very naive not to think that huge amount of money went into that campaign. You would have to be very naive. I mean, I don't know anyone who looked at that campaign, and I'm speaking of one of the campaigns in particular, that there was no question in people's mind, who is putting that money into that campaign? Who is putting, because it's real money, and it has happened before, when it's a huge amount of money. So let's start with, of course, which I know you do know, why it is that campaign financing is such a threat to a country's democracy, a threat to, is really a facilitator of corruption, organized crime, and money laundering, because a lot of the money, allegedly, this is a global phenomenon, that they say that when campaigns are financed, they use that as a mechanism to money launder, and it is part and parcel of organized crime. I did not say that about Trinidad and Tobago. I'm saying that's a global. If you look it up, that's what it said. So let's see what they say about campaign financing. And my point is, let me just make my point. If the Prime Minister, who spoke so passionately under the cover of parliamentary privilege, which gives her absolute privilege from an action for defamation, if what the Prime Minister said, with which I'm sure many Trinidadians felt that what was said had some truth in, I'm sure of that. And that's to tell you the state of this country. I don't think there are many people who listened to what the Prime Minister said and didn't believe her. Now, we can't go and say who we think it is, but I don't think there are many people who didn't think that it wasn't true. And on the flip side, I don't think there are many people in this country who do not believe that the renovation and the reconstruction in Balizé House was just by donors of cars. And even if it was, why is the government not letting us know who it is? Who is it? How much did they get? Because that is the whole issue about the secretiveness of the donation. Is the secretiveness of giving huge amount of monies to either a party or giving it to a candidate with the intention that if your party is successful, that you will be awarded multi-million-dollar contracts to which you probably should not have been entitled because of the cost overruns, etc. So let us look broadly. What is the campaign financing? And I have a statement I took off the internet, but also David West spoke to it, as well as there was an article in the Express that also spoke to it. So I'm going to use those sources to look at what it is about campaign financing and why it is our Prime Minister, both of them, all the talk, pass the law. It's not only pass the law, by the way. It reminds me of the procurement legislation. I don't know if you recognize it. In that when it came and it was passed through the parliament, so it became law, to enforce it, to operationalize it, you needed to proclaim it, and you needed to pass regulations. And Colin Imbert famously said, he says a lot of famous things that we remember. He said he's not a post office. Because they sent it to him, and he said he's not a post office. The point is that to make, you can pass something through the parliament, maybe because you want to satisfy international agencies that you're doing something about corruption, but the key to it is you need to operationalize it. To operationalize it, you have to move it from assenting to it to proclaiming it so that it becomes enforceable. So you put in place the persons, the infrastructure, all that is necessary to make it a law. And that has not been done in this country. And we can go back years. At least I could go back to 20. This is over a decade we're talking campaign financing. So what is it? Campaign financing laws are designed to combat corruption by controlling the flow of money into parties, ensuring transparency and reducing the ability of private interests to buy political influence. By regulating how much money is raised and spent, the law regulates anti-corruption objectives. Large donations are made in exchange for political favors to influence public policy. And of course, what is the ill of that? The playing field is not level. You can't compete against them, you know. I mean, I'm not saying they do it, but it's not unreasonable to think it's done. If you have a multi-million-dollar contract, how are you going to compete for that contract when those who have given huge donations to the party already told beforehand what are the key performance indicators, even if it's the program regulator in charge, what you need to put to ensure that you get the bid. And that is information, I suppose, that you should not give to any person or anyone who is tendering for the job. That's why the playing field is not legal. It's not level. So leveling the playing field relies on big money and lowering the cost of politics. Reducing corruption and minimizing the pressure to turn illicit funding sources such as money laundering and organized crime from being conceived of. This is not Trinidad. They were making broad statements. And we're talking about now for Trinidad, they said, I think I don't want to quote David West unfairly, because he did speak about it. He said that somebody else, I think that interviewed him, of campaign financing, he said inflated contracts, meaning that the contracts that are eventually awarded does not reflect the actual cost. And that, of course, who is it awarded to? This is the ills of campaign financing. When parties donate huge amounts of money, what you get is inflated contracts. Favorable policy change. Policy to whom? Policy change to whom? We're not talking about the green fund and you're for green energy against fossil fuel and all that stuff. But you will have, of course, you have people who have an interest in the outcome. But you have people who want to see policy change or a favorable policy change only to fatten their pockets. That's the objective. You have according to David West again, he said you have a disenfranchised electorate. He said the public gets disengaged and it's marked by low morale and poor productivity and declining in voter participation. He said democracy is compromised when money overrides ideas and donors influence policy making. Another article that was written by another I think it was an editor, she said unregulated campaign financing in Trinidad. Again, the inflated contract, favorable policy changes, board appointments. And this is the key, secretive donations. Prevents transparency, allowing for donors to exercise potential undue influence. The incumbents hold significant advantage, that's the person who's going up and being given the financing. Incumbent holds significant advantage accessing funds from firms in the state sector or those seeking state contracts. A lack of regulation, which is the key driver for corruption. And finally, for years, big money is behind political campaigning and it creates a disenfranchised electorate whose vote is secondary in the interest of the financial backers. So we know very broadly that campaign financing is not only the usual thing, transparency and accountability, but is the interest of a very few. And if that interest is of a very few, oftentimes it's not the interest of the larger citizenry who are unable to compete for a contract, especially if it's a government contract. Actually, David West, on the 27th of January this year, called for stronger finance rules to boost trust in Trinidad and Tobago. He said that the OPR, which is the Office of the Procurement Regulator, their first annual report, which was in 2024, highlighted wide non-compliance in several state enterprises, including UDICOT, HEC, NICO, no, it's 2024, so we have a new government. I don't know what the state of play is now, but it's 2024. Including UDICOT, HEC, NIDCO, THA, all failed to properly report. Also, there was no real clear reporting, disposal of state land or state assets, and similar disqualification. They also spoke that in 2024, they recommended, and both government and opposition signed a campaign transaction, I don't even know, I can't even make on my own handwriting, necessary to make political parties accountable. It all sounds very nice, but that brings me to the issue. So I think I've spoken, and finally, and I want to bring in that GERA, the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute, who only yesterday spoke about the urgent need for campaign financing. And this brings me to an article, The Real Route in the Express. And what was said is there's a link between a government contract, there's a nexus between government contracts and persons who are major donator, make major donation to that contract, to the government. So, you know, you have to wonder if there's not some truth in that, because the newspapers, as I said, I think it was The Guardian, was speaking about Danny Guerra. And they talked about, this is what they said, and I'm just quoting, and the Trinidad and Tobago Transparency Institute is calling on government to immediately prioritize campaign financing reform legislation. They asked for that and did it on the heels of the murder of Danny Guerra in Sangre Grande. And what they said, it raises concerns about the intersection of money, influence, and politics in Trinidad and Tobago. Articles in both Newsday and The Guardian have stated allegations that the businessman, that's Danny Guerra, had made large political contributions with claims ranging between $5 and $20 million. I say, while the motives for this heinous act remains under active investigation, this case underscores a deeper and long-standing national vulnerability, the absence of transparency and regulation in campaign financing. And they went on to say what are the weaknesses, and they used his case where he had donated significant sums to the, I don't know whose campaign, I can take a guess. Huh?
So the claim was made on Talking Point yesterday. I had Marvin Gonzalez, and he directly said to the effect of, I'm slightly paraphrasing based on memory, that this is an example of potentially, I'll put in that word, promises that were made before the campaign to certain elements of society that the incoming government, once they actually saw what was the situation, could not deliver on. And potentially, the reasoning is that is potentially the source of the threats against the government, right, in this example. Oh. And then citing the fact that Minister Sturge, he was the minister that reportedly had the actual, in the there was cars that was following him and a whole situation. But there was a whole situation in the papers, and he pointed it out that Marvin Gonzalez made the connection that the incident that was reported in the papers, that Minister State Security had to take him to a police station to keep him safe because there was a strange car reported in the papers by him and his team following him, right?
I think I read that.
Right. Marvin Gonzalez saying, well, hey, look at what's going on in Sangre Grande now. So there's a bit of correlation without, you know, concrete evidence.
And you know why there's no concrete evidence? Because you don't have campaign financing law. If you had campaign financing law, we know who contributed how much, who they contributed to, so you have a better indication rather than going through the this whole idea of speculating and making the connections which we are forced to make.
Or you could say, on the flip side, if you had campaign financing law, you also would have evidence that there is no connection. So it works both ways. It's like body cameras. It can clear you if you do nothing wrong. Right? I mean, and I guess as I now make that connection, you could make this similar. I mean, we did ask this question. I just didn't realize it's the same situation with body cameras. Why do we not have it? That's, I guess, the key question. Because as far as I'm aware, every now and then a politician will speak positively about it, but you never really hear anything close to commitment to it.
And you know what word you use? Politicians. So no disrespect to Martin Gonzalez, right? No disrespect to you, you know. But why you didn't pass the law? If you're so concerned about what happened with Danny Guerra, you know the answer is pass campaign financing legislation. If the Prime Minister is so concerned about the criminal financiers, drug trade financiers, financing Balzi House, pass the campaign. Why both of you? Neither of you. And you know, and so that brings me to the issue of delay. And the reason why I feel that there is some validity in that is why has Jamaica done it? Jamaica had the law passed in 2016. You know when they made that law? The next year, in 2017. Why is it since 2014? I have the notes here. They talk any talk. Both of you talk any talk. Both of you accusing the other of wrongdoing. Well, if you're doing it, there's an answer. And I tell you what, I'll give you some of the provisions which will answer it. But before I say that, delay, you know, sometimes delaying passing legislation is a mechanism of avoiding or preventing its passage and blaming each other. Why have, both of you know how terrible it is. Both of you have said that the other uses it to their advantage. Well, you know that there's an answer. It may not be a complete answer because Jamaica has passed a law and they have come up against some challenges which we should learn from. But the first step is to stop talking about it, stop accusing each other, and you are the legislators, you are the executive, you are the ones who have the ability to do it. Why are you not doing it? Because you know what we make people believe? We make people believe and you allow us to believe it. You allow us to believe it, that neither of you want it. Neither of you want it because when your party is getting a huge amount of donations, you don't want it exposed because when that donation from either from an individual or entity to a candidate or political party is made, and then they awarded a huge multi-million-dollar contract, you do not want to be accused of corruption. But if you pass the campaign financing legislation and you adhere to it, you will be able to look. That's a great political point. It goes to the issue that they talk about, the procurement legislation, all legislation, transparency and accountability. But if you really were committed to it, you have a means to stop talking the talk and blaming each other like taking us for fools, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to score brownie points with each other and talking about what the other one is doing when it's right in your face that you can do something which Jamaica has done. Why can't we do it? So, so on the issue of delay, for example, again I took this from the article from the newspapers. I think that interviewed Dr. Raleigh when he was still Prime Minister, and they asked him about prioritizing the passage of the campaign financing law. And this was September 2015. Who was it about government?
15?
September 2015.
September, I think that was the PNL.
I have a feeling it was because it spoke about him as the Prime Minister. Anyhow, he said that it has faced delays, but he's committed to it. But you know why it is languishing? Because I have to use the word languishing. Because he sent it to the Joint Select Committee of Parliament so that he could get parliamentary support. Now, I was supposed to look this up, and I did not. Is it a law that needs a special majority? Because if it doesn't, you don't need the support, you know. Are you committed to it or not? So you send it, and guess how long you sent, you know when you sent it to them? In 2014. Because I saw the parliamentary report with who, the Weidmark was the chair of that committee. It had a combination of opposition members as well as the government since 2014. You know how many years ago that is? 12 years. You want us to really believe that you are committed to campaign financing. And what they have done, so to be corrected, what they have done in 2025, and I believe it because this is my view, fative pressure, because you know that there was not just talk, it was, I think somebody from the, one of the diplomats did say that we were at risk of being, I don't know if blacklisted, but certainly not complying with the EU requirements for financial, the FATF regulations. And that is not good because that means banks won't deal with you, your standing in the global communities are compromised and so on. So from my understanding, in 2020-25, they did pass financial regulations related to financial crime framework. But guess what they didn't pass? That was in November. What they did not pass, and what people are asking them to pass, the regulation of political campaigns contributions, to say who is contributing what and how much. They didn't pass that. How are you committed? If you want to talk about Danny Gary, I'm not saying you can't talk about Danny Gary, you know, but if you had the proof, the accounts showing when he had to register, when he had to submit his donation, either for a candidate or a political party, that will be recorded and therefore we would know, we no longer speculation. Similarly, when you're building Balize House, and the Prime Minister makes allegations of criminal networks and drug trade and so on, you would be able to tell us who contributed, how much they contributed, and agree with the issue of transfer. But you're not doing it either, because neither of you, when it is in your interest, you say campaign financing. When it's not your interest, suddenly you have all kinds of excuses why it can't be done. Why is it that Jamaica has done it? Why is it that Jamaica seems to lead in a lot, to tell you the truth, eh? So what did they do in Jamaica? Which, when we look at we do have the law, and it's very similar to Jamaica's law. So what they did is the key aspects of their law. Number one, what do you think is number one? Disclosure. That's what we want you to disclose. They mandate disclosure. Now, when do you have to disclose your contribution? Once you make, now in Jamaican dollars, it's 250,000 Jamaican dollars. The equivalent, at least how they've made the conversion for Trinidad. And I think the Joint Select Committee agreed to that. Any contributor, either individual or entity, once you contribute $50,000 or more to a party or to a candidate, you have to disclose it. And by the way, it's put on a public site. So you are able to go on a public site and see who it is and how much. So when contracts are awarded, and they're questioning, how do you get that contract? And then you start hearing all the problems with the contract. Now, there may be problems with the contract that have nothing to do with that, but it certainly puts another layer on it, and it deals with the issue that we are supposed to be interested in this country, to hold our politicians, to make them accountable, to make them transparent. And that is, at least if nothing else, it does that. So the number one thing they have is disclosure. They also, with disclosure, there's something where they are prohibited, persons are prohibited from donating. That is foreign governments, because you don't want them influencing your foreign policy, apparently, through donations. Anyway, you have the foreign governments. You also have state entities, obviously, because whoever forms the incumbent will have tremendous influence over the huge state enterprises that are flush with money, and they can use that entity to finance their campaign. So state entities, foreign governments, and persons involved in illegal practices. But that might be a little more difficult to be able to determine. But once it costs $50,000, you have to disclose. Also, if you have within the last 2 years been awarded a government contract, you need to disclose it. Because we want to see. You just got a contract 2 years ago within the last 2 years. We want to see if you donated to that same party. Because obviously the impression may be given that you got your contract 2 years ago, you're going to donate to them, because many of the small and medium enterprise, they do say that. They do say that they are under pressure to donate to parties in order to get their contract or to get payment. That is what is said. Now, I can't say it's true, but this legislation says that we need to know and we can know, and there's no effort to do that. So there's a donation limit, as I said. There are penalties for false or non-disclosure of donations, and that is why the regulations in Jamaica, and what we're supposed to pass here, is a register of political parties. So every political party that wants to contest the election has to register, and the advantage of that is any dealings with that party has to be through it as a registered party, which is set up by the EBC, Election and Boundaries Commission, just like Jamaica. So when you want to make donations, you have to make it through the EBC. When you want to claim expenditure, you have to report it to the EBC. The EBC also is entitled to deregister you if they feel that you have not complied with the rules and regulations, including material and disclosure that is accurate. They also have that tremendous power. They deregister, you can't go up. Your political party is not a registered political party. So they have tremendous power. They also have the power for you to submit all your accounts, all your documents. You see, like Balize House, if they had that, they all know they'd have to do that too. Yeah, they see it. And when you submit it, this is what the register is supposed to have, is persons who are trained in forensic auditing. So those are the things that I think as a priority to the government, to the Prime Minister, to Balize House and the former Prime Minister Patrick Manning, to Martin Gonzalez, and all of them. If you're really, really interested in transparency and accountability, if you really want to have credibility, if you really want to have the trust, at least begin to have the trust of the people of this country, you need to stop the talk and walk. Do like Jamaica. Pass the law. Don't use a delay, send it to the parliamentary committee. Then you can find some other reason, you know. Because it's how many years the Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, sent it to them in 2014. This is 12 years later, and it still hasn't seen the light of day. Why it is in Jamaica they could pass it? Oh, they also said, no, the last thing I will mention, I'm looking at, is that they implemented the law and operationalized the law in Jamaica. So the last thing I want to say is there are going to be challenges. Let us learn from the challenges and the challenges that Jamaica did have when they implemented it. And so some of the things that they found is that what person donors attempted to do, because their limit is 250,000 Jamaican, which is, I guess, equivalent of 50,000. Many people were making cash-based or gift transactions, so that they weren't paying you in a check, because you could follow the money, but they were paying you in cash, or maybe the award of a job, a senior position, appointment on their boards. I don't know what they are, but what they're saying is it's not easy to get the evidence to show how much money is being donated, because there are various ways of getting around the requirement to say how much your donation is. And that is what Jamaica has found. And they said it was the cash-based or gift-based donations. They also said another major issue, which we could take note of, lack of robust auditing, allowing high campaign expenditure to go unreported. So what they recommend is you should have a specialized audit department which provides forensic auditing and has stricter transparency reporting. So you know that in advance, which is another reason to delay, I suppose. And then enforcement challenges. This is whilst the EBC, which is the equivalent, exists, they have a limited capacity for auditing returns, and the legislation does not strongly compel identification of financial backers. They also said the spending limits, widely recognized, is that it is ignored, with candidates spending significantly more than permitted. Hidden finances, given in cash or kind, which is what you have spoken about, the gifts. And gifts can take all kinds of things.
So it comes up with regards to things like law enforcement and the like. You know, there are some areas, jurisdictions, cities where they just say no gifts. Because why? Because, look, I'm not saying there was anything untoward about this, but questions were had with regards to the whole Inez Gate thing, and the Prime Minister at the time, Dr. Thurl, kept saying it was a gift. And my thing was, look, on some level, politicians, if you don't want people to question you about the gifts you receive, then just don't accept gifts. Now, on some level, it would be kind of a stretch for me to say, Dr. Thurl, you should not accept a townhouse, because, listen, I don't know.
Not a stretch, he shouldn't.
Okay, he shouldn't, right?
He shouldn't.
But if it's allowed, unless I'm, you know, as a country, unless we're saying that the rest of us would basically not accept that gift, it's a interesting situation. That's why you need the law to say it's not allowed. But yes, he should not have accepted it.
He should not? Because he's a policy maker. You know why he shouldn't accept it? Because he has the power to decide which land is going to be subject to X rules. He has too much tremendous power to give him a gift. And I remember when I was in government, you were allowed to take accept a gift, but they put a limit. Once it went over that limit, you couldn't accept it. So even if you said you could have accepted a gift, I don't think a townhouse somehow or the other qualifies. A townhouse is a home.
It was, well, no, so technically the gift was a reduction.
Right, so
that's what made it.
Let's get it right, before we get in trouble.
That's what made it a bit more gray area, because it wasn't, if it was the whole townhouse, then it would be like, well, how is a whole townhouse a gift?
You know what is on more, you make it more gray area. It's not made it a more gray area. It just tells you, all due respect to you, it makes it sit down and say, we're not going to go with the house, but we want to get a financial relief. How we could do it without breaking the law? You know, that is the problem, of course, which I just highlighted with enforcement of the rules.
Well, I think the unfortunate thing is it comes back down to like when you have the perception of potential conflict of interest. It's not about if there is or not.
Right.
It's the same thing with the gift. It creates a perception that there might be a conflict of interest here in anything you do that might then involve the people involved, because I believe Inez Real Estate is connected to Mr. Warner Sr. Mr. Warner Sr. does a lot of business for the government, which a lot of that at the time would have been under the PNM Tobago Council. And it's again, goes back to the body cameras. It's not about you are guilty and we just want something to hang over your head. It is, no, you could be innocent and this would clear you, as opposed to putting politicians in a place where, and notice, they never really give details in their defense. So what is it left for the public to do but not speculate on the worst possible scenario? Because that's usually what happens, basic human psychology. If you're looking to hide something, I'm going to think that you have something bad to hide, not something benign or innocent to hide. I'm not going to assume that. That's not reasonable human psychology, whether it's right or wrong. That's just human nature.
And the last thing, dealing with the effectiveness, which applies across the board, fear of victimization. People are afraid that they're reluctant to call names, and that is what the Jamaican experience has been. And I was looking for a note, because what was really troubling was there seemed to be a certain normalization, even in Jamaica, that's par for the course. So I'm making a very wide statement. I don't think it is as it is, I think, as entrenched as it is in Trinidad. I suspect it is not. The very fact that they passed the legislation, and the very fact that they're doing something about the legislation, and they have had successes in it, according to the report on what has happened in Jamaica. But I just wanted to end today's commentary was when I read what the Prime Minister said. I'm not saying there's no value in what the Prime Minister said, you know, because to be frank with you, I mean, whether this is true or not, there are a lot of people who believe it, you know. And how do you counter that? Mm-hmm. You counter that by saying, listen, we have campaign finance laws. If the campaign finance laws, you go up on the internet, you will see how many cars were contributed, or the cost of the cars, and then you're going to be able to make the connection, if at all, between the award of contracts or policy decisions that are favorable to that particular group. And if you're seeing, and it could be a one for all, but if you're seeing a pattern, then it creates the whole situation where we are trying in this country, as a developing country, to maintain all the ideas of democracy, that you are then saying to the people of Trinidad, we are going to be as transparent as we can. So yes, what the Prime Minister said had value, but would it be far more effective if the Prime Minister said in Parliament, we are so committed to this, the campaign financing legislation has languished for so many years, it may not be a complete response or prescription to the issues that we are facing, but it certainly goes a long way, and it certainly will assist the people of this country to know where the money is going, who is donating the money, and who is getting the contracts. And the same thing goes for the PNM. When that Balize house and that 25,000 square foot building next door, I mean, I'm sorry, it's really hard to believe that it was these cars. And if it is the cars, well, tell us who gave you the cars.
Well, raffle.
Raffle. Yeah, but somebody gave them the cars to raffle it. Right? So they had to get a donation of cars to be able to raffle them. They will tell us who they are. Tell us how much. Why won't you tell us how much? Why won't you tell us? And then people made this meme and joke about sugar cake and Tulu, because I think that was so, I mean, that was by the way, we're not supposed to take that very seriously. But tell us who they are. And if you're not telling us, why don't you want to tell us? Why don't you want to disclose it? And when they delay on both sides, because when it went to the Joint Select Committee, joint means both parties. Why did it take you so long to come to some decision so that you could take it back to the Parliament, have it assented to, and then proclaimed? There is no political will. I am saying that. there's a lack of political will on both sides of the aisle. And why am I saying that? Because we don't have the law. And we could talk and sound hard. We could call, let me not call names, but we call different politicians who could throw stones at the other party. But you know what the answer is? Why are you not doing it? Why are you not doing it? Both of you. Because when it's your turn, it suits you. When it's not your turn, then it doesn't suit you. So what do you leave for us as the electorate to believe? Do you think we believe that you are really interested in transparency and accountability? Do you think we really feel that you want to weed out the corruption? Do you really think that we believe that when that donors, these huge donors who contribute millions of dollars to campaign for return on investment, unlike, because I asked you to look up this thing with lobbying. Because one of the things that concern me, somebody could say, well, isn't campaign financing, in a sense, a bit like lobbying, because they do have lobby groups in the United States who lobby for their interests. But
well, lobbying is supposed to be the act of influencing government policy, legislative decisions on behalf of different groups. So I believe, right, this is not necessarily what is practiced, but what is supposed to be practiced is you have a lobby group for whatever interest. It could be the auto manufacturers, it could be the airlines, right? It could be green energy, it could be the banks. And they are basically talking off the airs. Maybe, the limit would be, okay, I'll take you to lunch or something like that, right? And you're talking off the air of whatever senator or representative about what can be done in your state. So there is the...
And there's legislation, by the way.
Right, there is the quid pro quo. We need this thing there, and then maybe, this could benefit your state like this. We could do this in your state. This will be for so many workers. This will be improve the wages or the lifestyle or the industry or whatever. Or it could be, this bill you're talking about, it will kill the automotive industry. And in your state, there's so many workers in that industry, you will lose so many jobs. Are you sure you want to do this? But the point is,
what they do also use influencers.
Yes.
And they use if they're on boards, whether it's CBS, Fox, or so on, they use those mechanisms to get people to talk. So they're trying to influence policy decision.
Right, but they're not necessarily
passing money,
bribing. Yeah. Right? And like I said, now on some level, the gray area, the ugliness starts when you say, well, if you do this, there will be a favor that is not really a financial remuneration, but maybe a political favor. Now, to some level, that's how politics is done, yes. But then, of course, I am sure there will be accusations about potentially illegal money crossing hands for lobbying. That's not what it's supposed to be, right? It's not supposed to be that way. But in TNT, we don't actually even have any sort of professional lobby groups. But what we do have are interests and a lot of accusations about financial consideration being passed back and forth with regards to servicing those interests. And there's a lot of unknowns, and Karen is basically saying, why should we accept the status quo when the status quo is basically one big black hole of unknown and speculation and ugly accusations? And the thing is, her point is right. If you are so convinced that the other side is guilty of something, why not then enact the legislation that will allow you to clean that up, that will prevent it from happening in the future, right? Now, currently, Kamala Persad-Bissessar is the Prime Minister, the UNC is the party in power, right? And it really comes down to the Prime Minister, right? Our politics is not one where individual members have a lot of leeway. So it comes down to her. How important is this to her and the UNC as a whole? We'll see. We saw what it was with the last administration, which is mainly a reflection on Dr. Heath Rowley and his priorities as political leader of the PNM. And if Penelope Beckles or somebody else gets a chance to be Prime Minister with a new PNM government, they will then subsequently be tested if this has not been resolved yet. But the fact of the matter is, our Prime Minister has leveled some strong accusations, and the difference in her and what Marvin Gonzalez said yesterday was that she could do something about it now, right? Just like how Dr. Heath Rowley didn't do anything about it 2 years ago, will she not do anything about it now? And then there's...
What she said she's doing something about campaign financing? She said,
Well, I'm just saying, if you
but has she
think
said that?
no,
Oh.
right? But if you're saying that the PNM is being financed by drug dealers and you are the tough on crime prime minister because the previous administration did nothing on crime, right? That's essentially the narrative that is being crafted. Look how much better we are on crime. Well, you can't accuse the other party of getting their funds from criminal enterprise and then be unwilling and then be unwilling, right, to enact any legislation to combat it. And then there's another issue, which is not as important, but still important, right? The overall basic premise of campaign financing, in my mind, in theory, would make our elections fairer, right? That's all. Fairer. Not necessarily that it will mean that the money will be exactly the same in both parties, but now everything will be transparent.
And then I think the issues that confront us in terms of lobbying, the major issues will be the issues that the government or the party will focus on, as opposed to the big money interests.
Yes.
You know, and by the way,
but also for elections, if I know that party A is heavily financed by corporations, I'm sure voters will then ask the question, well, if I elect them, is it my interest or big business interest that's going to go on? And if the alternative party isn't as heavily financed, and maybe they have records, maybe it was raffles and cake sales, right? And they have records to show it, and video evidence and what have you, and a whole institute to say, hey, it's above board. Well, then perhaps you go with the grassroots as opposed to the big business finance.
Okay, what I would say, by the way, before I go to respond to that, there are a number of articles on the web, which is a wonderful thing about the internet. And there's an article by the myth that lobbying and campaign giving are the same. So this person devoted a whole article to show the distinction between the two. What I will say, it's not a panacea for all the wrongs. You're not going to,
But there's issues with lobbying.
No, I'm talking about the campaign finance.
I know. But lobbying has its own issues.
Right, and people have a way that history will show you. You put in a rule, they'll find a way around it. So we're not saying that they won't find a way around it. Also, too, sometimes even when you think that the reason why they're promoting a particular position may not really be that at all, and you don't know that.
These are politicians.
Politicians,
right?
and
With
the finance, and the financiers behind them, who have taken a position. I mean, to get myself a little bit in, well, I don't think I get myself too much in trouble for that. But I do recall when I came in to office, they had that whole thing with the gambling. Now, who are the ones that benefit from, or who will not benefit if you close on gambling? It's widely recognized. It's not a Trinidad and Tobago issue. Gambling is known for its money laundering and organized crime. They go hand in hand. When people try to make it into a religious thing and, oh, gambling will destroy family structures, yes, that is true. And that is true, but that's only part of the story. We were trying at that time, at least I understood the government, to really be trying to go after the drug trade. And drug trade had many different tentacles. And one of those tentacles, as we saw it, was gambling, because gambling does facilitate. You can read it up. It's not Trinidad. It's any country. You go and look it up right now. The major problem with gambling and those casinos is that it allows money to be laundered and it facilitates organized crime. So when I did come into the office, there was, as I understood it, a huge movement by the then Prime Minister to shut down gambling. And I think Conrad O'Neill was the face for the ministry, because that's what I can recall. I'm subject to being corrected. But who do you think they put out there? You know who they put out there? As I remember, the woman with the babies. I can't feed my child.
These are the workers of the...
Yes, and it's all about, Paul, look what you do to the social and economic fabric of Trinidad. Look who you're suffering. We're behind the scenes. So you see what you're told, and I'm just using that from my example, that I saw when I came in, that what they did, and they had all the pictures of these pair, and they were suffering, because when you shut down the gambling casinos, Yes, they saw some funding, money was going to dry up, and I guess they made a good bit of money, I don't know. But what they made it into, as if it was all about them, it was not about them. It was not about them. So you have to be very careful when government takes a position against a particular activity or particular, sometimes you really don't know what is the real reason behind it. So I would just close on that issue. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I mean, to your point, it goes back to what you said about procurement, right? It's one of those things where everyone says, you know, we agree, and this is so great, and it is so important, but usually the more prominent and energetic voices come from whoever's in opposition at the time on the issue, right? Or you might have something like Tobago autonomy, where we've reached the point now where we've had multiple THA elections, right, and a national election. And at one point, Tobago autonomy was a campaign promise by both parties, right? It was the PDP and the then Tracy Davidson Celestin PNM, who were both for Tobago autonomy. And of course, the PNM central government was in power, but then also the UNC was for Tobago autonomy. So now, at no point did any change in government really make a difference to the issue. How close are we to even getting a proper legal definition of what Tobago autonomy means so that it can actually be, you know, put forward? We're nowhere close. We're nowhere close. You still have people on the Tobago stations in the last election in Tobago basically saying, I don't know what Tobago autonomy is. And this is recent. And the thing with campaign finance reform, one of the first obstacles is we have to be willing to say, yes, we want it, and then actually do something about it to start to define what does it mean to us? What are the limits? What are the regulations? What is the levels of transparency and accountability required? And of course, put all the things in place and act it, because the thing with procurement is, as members of the public who aren't in the government, we're not entirely sure to the full extent that the Office of Procurement Regulation is fully operational and able to execute their duties. We have no idea, and fully independent, exactly. Yeah, so this is multiple stages, right? Even down to the implementation and then the maintenance of the organizations, facilities, offices, whatever, because of course you had this situation with the DPP, right? All of these things matter. There are so many ways this could go wrong or be undermined. But at the end of the day, I don't know, fair elections where we don't have to speculate about the illegal money going into our politics. If you really care about crime, are you willing to tolerate drug money financing political parties?
It may not be drug money, let's be careful, because it could be influential money.
I'm asking, I'm throwing it out there, because these are the claims made by the politicians. And if you're a UNC supporter or a PNM supporter, your party, both of your parties made the claim.
And the Prime Minister did say that.
The Prime Minister did it on the Hansard for all to see. So if this, listen, for all the UNC supporters, if you believe that your Prime Minister is speaking the truth, then
she said the local drug mafia financed the headquarters as a gravestone of drug money. She also said, this is quoting her, the criminal financiers with ties to the drug trade funded PNM headquarters construction, part of a broader construction fake, she loved that saying, eat a food, fake eat a food elite network. So she definitely made a nexus between drugs
that's another thing.
And campaign financing.
If eat a food is a problem, then we should see legislation to stop eat a food, right?
You know what you should, you know, if the Prime Minister, and this is the concern I have, and that's where you have the cynicism. And by the way, as I've said before, I am not against the government, this government.
More importantly, it might seem as though it's directed against the government, because it's not so much directed against them, but they're the ones that could actually enact policy. The framework would have been quite the opposite if it was a PNM-led government. It would be PNM who basically will get, you'll be talking about that, because they will be the one, and make no mistake, the PNM, on some level, they only had a simple majority last go around. So that might have been a stumbling block on certain things. This government has, at least in the lower house, a 3/5 majority, right? And listen, if you want to say upfront the independent senator is not going to support you, let me just say this. Why don't you give them a chance to disappoint us and then complain about them, and then we will join in with you if they do. But if you want to insult them up front, yes. It don't, listen, it might work for Trump when dealing with drug boats. It doesn't necessarily work when trying to deal with national policy and winning over the independent senators to your side.
You know, can I just say this before you go on to the pursuit code? I have nothing against this government. I want this government to succeed. But I could never forget what the Prime Minister, which I believed her. I am not dealing with corruption. I already said to some people inside her government that I don't think they should be there. But quite apart from that, if you really committed to dealing with corruption, why didn't you pass the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority? Why haven't you dealt with the Gambling Commission? Why haven't you dealt with campaign financing? These are low-hanging fruit that would show to us that you are really committed to rooting out corruption. And we're not seeing that.
We have to take the call, but I'll just say this. It's not as though after the election, Karen then started to say the words campaign finance reform. She has been saying it from before, during the PNM's time in office. We have Diego Martin on the line? Dabadi on the line, sorry. Dabadi, good morning, you're on here.
Hey, Sean, morning to Karen.
Right.
Karen, you look beautiful this morning, as usual.
Okay.
How you doing?
Thanks.
Sean, I don't think that anybody can debate that there is actually a need for campaign finance legislation. And any part of the world you go, you'd realize that that is an eyesore in the whole electioneering process. So we really need it. And transparency is what we want in any form of governance. Mm-hmm. So whether you are UNC or in JAC, whoever you are, it is necessary to have that kind of thing. But I must say though, where the PNM is concerned, I, as an individual of over 100,000 members, would have made contribution in the vicinity of about at least $2,500, and I am not rich.
Right.
I consider myself to be a lower middle class individual. So I can't speak about other persons who would have contributed, but besides what the executive not saying is that you had other fundraisers like where they had bricks. They had a whole blocks with bricks that you could have bought a brick regardless of who you are. And then to the constituencies themselves were responsible for raising funds and donating it to the building. You know, so I think there are many other things that went into fundraisers towards the building. And I must say, you all are looking at, shouldn't say you all, Sean, you are looking at one building versus the other building. The renovation for that first part couldn't cost more than $250,000. Because it's the same building that they did refurbishment to.
As far as I'm aware, it's not the same
building. Think about it.
It's
look at the building on the left-hand side in your picture.
Caller, that's a new building.
And
that's not the same
all right,
building.
if you don't agree with me, but I do contractual work too, and I know it couldn't cost more than all right, okay. But the main would have taken most of the money. So it wasn't like separate funds, car raffle for the building on the left and how you get funding for the building on the right. You know, so I think that is, and from time to time in schools, NGOs and things, getting donation of cars from maybe Trinity Motors or Massey, and they raffle it and they make in the millions, because sometimes one raffle will take almost 6 months to a year. I'm talking factual thing that I know about here now, before it is drawn. So quite a lot of tickets are actually sold. And at one time they were raffling BMWs. I don't know who donated the BMWs, but I know BMWs are high-end vehicles and they're very expensive.
Yeah.
All right, so that is it for thing. Karen, you know, as usual, you come through with a lot of factual information, and we look forward to it on this program. Sean, have a nice day, and I'll continue listening often.
Thank you, Cole.
I want to say this. You know what I want to say? And thank you very much. You know what is sad? That you have to come and try to explain it to us. You have to try to tell us, well, you know, I gave this, and they did this. You know what? If you had campaign financing legislation, you wouldn't have to do it. Because you could tell what Ferdy Ferreira couldn't do, and what the Prime Minister could not do. He should have been able to say, look, here are the records, this is the contribution, this is the audited accounts, this is the money that we made from it. So now when you add it up, this accounts for why we were able to do what we're doing. But you know what he has done to people who support the PNM? They put you in a position that you are trying to defend an indefensible position when you should never have been put in that position. If your party cared one iota about you and the hard work that you do and the contribution you made, which by the way, 2,500, you don't need to disclose it, right? Maybe when they're doing the
Well, I think you just wanted to give us an idea about the...
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the point I'm trying to make is I'm not taking away from what, you obviously feel very strongly about it and you feel that you need to defend what happened with the PNM. But you know, this is what was said. If you had campaign financing legislation, and even if you didn't even have the law, because the law is what forced you to do it, but if you had done that, what you would not need to come out and defend it. You would be saying, yeah, did you look at the audit accounts? Did you see the EBC set up registered political parties? Do you know that they have a whole group of forensic audited experts who are going through with a fine-tooth comb and can account for every cent that was contributed? I don't need to tell you how they built. And the other thing too, so that's the first point. It is so unfortunate, and you indirectly made the point why they need it. You shouldn't have to do this. The Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, should have been able to do what you were forced to do. The other thing that you said is that it didn't cost as much. You see, that's the problem. That, I'm not saying it happened there. That is the problem when money is given to parties for multi-million-dollar contracts. When the contract should cost 10 million, but it ended up costing 20 million because there are huge cost overruns and people getting their kickback. Because I gave you the contract, and you got the contract because I know that when I award you the contract, I know it's 10 million, but don't worry about it. We will bring it up to 20 million. You have cost overrun, and don't worry, hold that. And the fact that you try to defend the cost of doing the renovations to Balsey House was much less than people are saying. Does it not raise the issue, why did it cost so much?
Well, to that end, if you remember where Balsey House was originally located on the property, it was away from the road, right? That's number one. Also, if you've ever been inside Balsey House and been inside the new structure, you would know that essentially this is a whole new building. And even if it was renovated off of the old Balsey House, it still has new construction because the new structure is a lot closer to the road than what the old Balsey House used to be, right? That is to say, the structure that is inhabiting or built on the previously existing Balsey House's lot.
Sean.
So it's not just a renovation of an old building and you just made it modern. It is a larger structure, right? And I believe that the old Balsey House was completely knocked down and this was rebuilt in its place after right? So the amount of money spent there, I don't believe it's as low as you think it is.
You know what, Sean? This is my point. That gentleman, I think he genuinely believes or minimizes the amount that it costs to do it. And you are saying it's not that. We don't have to have this discussion. We don't have to. That is why we want campaign finance. Don't you understand? If we have it, you will shut up, Sean. We may shut you up too. I don't know. But what we will know is, listen, because they asked the Prime Minister, I have the, I don't know if it was a Facebook, so I saw him actually a video. He went to something with a steel and something, and they asked him about the cost of doing over the Balsey House and he would not answer. Why won't he answer? Why won't he? Now, if they had campaign financing legislation, he won't answer. Not only, even if the information he gave was inaccurate, what they're saying that's happening in Jamaica, which we should make sure won't happen here, is they have forensic auditors will go behind what you say, and I'll say to what the actual cost. And if the actual cost is X, why don't you want to tell us?
The thing is, it does not help the situation. Look, Mr. Dabity, when Mr. Dabity called and he went into detail, right? He didn't necessarily give us any books. He didn't necessarily give us any records, but at least he went into detail, right? And we appreciate that, because now it starts to make more sense. When officials that are asked the question could either, they don't have an answer, they're not able to answer, or they say things like, well, it was a raffle with some cars or whatever, and they oversimplify or downplay the situation. It does not look good, because at the end of the day, all politicians should be wary about anything that might appear to be some sort of financial corruption or et cetera, right? Because you could ask Karen, on some level, and I don't know if I made this clear, I'm not unwilling to believe that the PNM did not finance the structure on its own with legitimate means, in part because look how long that building is taking to construct. Now, I would think if it was drug money, that thing would have gone up lickety-split. Like, I believe it was, the construction started before COVID.
I agree with that part.
Well, anyway, that's my opinion. That's my opinion. Now, I'm not saying that that is justification that it is not any sort of funny business. I'm just saying, if there was funny business involved, I doubt it would have taken so long, right? But more importantly, back to what Karen is saying, proof, accountability. It deals with all the uncertainty and all the questions one time. Now, with regards to the two buildings,
and if you don't want to give us the answer, what does they do? Leads to speculation.
Right. And now with the two buildings, I have very limited knowledge, but I suspect that they are two separate projects. And the intention of the first construction did not include the second smaller building. If you could pull up one of those photos again, right, just so I can make it clear, right? That gray building, that was intended to be Balize House. I don't know if they intended a sub-building next to it, but that the old Balize House was, as far as I'm aware, knocked down.
And by the way, can I just say this? For real, because I got it. I got the article, right? Where he was asked to say, PNM founding member, Prime Minister, best to negotiate with donors for Balize House. I didn't even know, which probably you knew, that they were in debt. He had to pay off a debt. He said, Farrah 7, Dr. Rowley became party leader in 2010. So it didn't come with a clean slate. You know, the PNM was heavily in debt to the bank, and car raffles were held in 2011 and 2013, as well as other fundraising initiative. That was done to write off the debt. But later on in the interview, which what he was really saying is that he really is saying that he's not going to focus on the fact of finding the proof, as I understood it, of how much it costs. He's so elated and so pleased with how the Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, was able to achieve what he achieved. But the point about it is, you know, whilst you are, I'm trying to find where he actually spoke to it. The point is that he talked about the car raffles and so on, and he said the raffles helped to pay off the mortgage. You know, if the raffles helped to pay off the, until, this is what he said, until we could provide some empirical evidence otherwise, then I would not venture into where the money came from. That's what he said.
Now, on some
level,
level,
the fact of the matter is, it's a massive construction project. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be 91 this year, and I'm hoping to be alive for the opening. If they ain't invite me yet, I will so. Anyhow, the point is,
in a way, he kind of went in two different directions in what he just said. Because on one hand, he's like, well, I'm not bothered about certain things. But he's like, but it's a big construction project. And I'm like, yeah, when it's that big, maybe the, you know, things like the cost matters.
No, I want to read what he said. This is one of the founding members of the PNM, and they were interviewing him about the Balize House, you know. This is what it says. Ferdinand Ferreira, a founding member of the PNM, says the party has always had difficulty raising money. Oh God, this is not helpful. But anyway, he says, but if the Prime Minister, not the campaign financing law, but if the Prime Minister says the party got the money to construct the new 5-story building next to Balsey House through fundraising initiatives, then Ferreira will take him at his word, because as Dr. Rowley is in a better position to negotiate with donors. But if you ever saw a rationalization from none other than a founding member of the PNM, that we want an independent body camera equivalent evidence corroborating what we are told by Dr. Rowley and into Balsey House that is heavily indebted, who according to Ferdy Ferreira, 91 years, a founding member, always had difficulty raising money. If anybody took that as an affidavit or witness statement, it really brings to play, well, where did that money come from? And the answer to that is, Dr. Rowley, pass the campaign financing law. Let us know.
Well, I mean, that ship sailed.
Huh?
but the thing is, right, now, I could appreciate one of the things that he said, because with regards to criminal law, yes, it is not necessarily the demands that the PNM have to provide evidence of their innocence, otherwise they will be criminally considered guilty by the law. However, in the court of public opinion, those standards are quite different.
They're politicians.
Right? And we're just saying we want transparency to put all the speculation to bed. Right? We're not actually saying, hey, definitely drug money here, definitely drug money there, UNC drug money, PNM drug. No, we're not, right? That would be, there's no evidence of that, right? And you need evidence of that to actually make that claim, unless you just take on parliamentary privilege as though, you know, it's a political tool for politicking. But anyway, let me not say anything further about that. The point is, the court of public opinion, and it didn't need the Prime Minister to say anything about it to bring up questions about the building. I have heard questions about that building long before. She is just voicing it in a very aggressive manner, and you could add whatever else you wanted in a very public forum, right? But she's not saying anything that has not been speculated upon and worse, or maybe not worse, maybe just as bad, by members of the public. And if public perception matters, then you know what? Tools to ensure accountability. Because Karen was right, you didn't need campaign finance reform to deal with the Balsey House question. No. Right? So the question then is, why do you not want to deal with it? I suspect the internal politics is the general answer why. But I won't say anything more than that. All right, we're running out of time. Let's take the comments quick. Good day. The murder of any child needs the strongest condemnation, and it's good to see the outrage being expressed of the child murdered locally. Yet the massacre of 175 children in the U.S. first attack on Iran has not been widely condemned locally. If, in fact, our government has openly sided with the U.S. on its illegal war against Iran. Now, I don't know. Here's the thing. On some level, I could appreciate this, because I do remember the Palestine issue resonated a lot more than the Iran issue. And that's all I'll say about that.
What resonated more?
Locally, there were more people, I think, were more concerned about Israel and the violence inflicted on Palestine than America and whatever it is they're doing in Iran.
Yeah, but that is because of human rights consideration. But most recently, there's a gentleman from MIT, and they are saying that if that Strait of Hormuz, which shuts off 20% of the global supply of energy, and also the feedstock for fertilizers, which will affect food, which will affect inflation, that we are looking more at a global crisis. And this is Associated Press. I read an article on Associated Press. And so I would...
So there was an airstrike conducted by the U.S., right? What happens is, in order for speed, this is what I understand, AI is used to go over intelligence, because one of the issues is, like satellite photo reconnaissance, in the past you would need someone to do it, you know, essentially by hand, right, by eye, right? But now with AI, you could automate a lot of processes that would have been very labor intensive. And the problem was, the automated process caused them to strike something that was a school. It was no longer a military facility. And that's what the comment is referencing. And I'm just saying, it's not about if I agree or disagree with these situations. I'm just saying, locally, we will latch on to certain things, And then similar things might happen somewhere else, but it just won't resonate as much. And I am left to be very much...
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Right? Yeah.
But what I think he's ended by saying, I think he started by saying the amount of children who have been killed. I don't want to get into it.
There was a murder of an 11-month-old last night.
Right. So I think they're using that as a sort of symbol or emblematic of what's going on in Iran. But when he ended what he said, that war in Iran, I'm just reading this headline, Trump claims Iran president wants a ceasefire. I mean, that's not Trump's style. That issue with, when you read what is going on in Iran, people are very concerned that that'll have global implications. So yes, I understand the point you make about the child, and it has become more than, and I don't want to,
You want to hear something scary?
What I want to hear, what's scary?
So the Americans and Israelis might have been so successful that the power structure in Iran might be fractured. So potentially he might be talking to somebody.
Yeah.
But other parties in Iran might still be shooting off missiles because they're not, they may, I didn't get this from a good source, they may be so fractured, the left hand ain't keeping up with what the right hand is doing.
And I read on Associated Press, because the brinkmanship, this is a global issue, so what they're saying is everybody's talking hard talk. Trump talking hard talk, I'm going to blow up all the oil wells. If you don't open that Strait of Hormuz, we're going to blow up the oil wells, we're going to destroy the oil industry. But what they're saying, that behind the scenes is not two groups going different ways, but my understanding is we're saying that for the globe, for the public digestion, for them to see that both parties are warmongers and neither party is going to give in. But they both understand, America understands what it means to them. They have, from what I read, they said they have sent thousands of troops into the Middle East. He promised after Afghanistan no boots on the ground, and he was very successful in Venezuela. He was very successful in Iran. That's not happening in Iraq. All I would say is this, from what I understand, the caller or the person who wrote, yes, issue of the murder of children was a big issue, or the alleged murder. Let me be careful, but it seems that it's true in the Palestinian war. I mean, every day you're reading something, and even I think Trump, President Trump, was surprised according to what I.
Also, there's a wider issue on the Iran-Pakistan-Afghanistan border.
You know what's the wider issue here? I couldn't tell you what the wider issue is. Right now in America, it's $4 US. No, it's inflation, cost of living, and we are going to feel it in this country.
Pakistan and Afghanistan are currently at war. And the eastern part of Iran that shares a tri-border region might also be involved.
And how is it going to affect us? Cost of living.
Well,
that's what it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes,
all right.
Cost of living.
Let's go to the next comment quick. The enormous financing that went into the last election raises questions as to the origin of the donors that may be local, but also external. Could an external donor be the one influencing government foreign policy? I ask the question. Now, purely speculative, without any evidence, we're speaking about possibilities, not what we think actually is. I would say yes.
And to answer your question more directly, the legislation not only puts a limit to how much a person can donate, but they also say persons who are not permitted to donate. And among them are foreign governments, state entities, and persons who are involved in illegal activity. So I believe if you took the trouble to put into the legislation that you would prohibit foreign governments from contributing to financing your party's election, it answers your question that way, I believe. Because they would not have put in that provision if research had not been done, and if they had not looked, because that's how the government would operate in terms of drafting legislation.
But there's loopholes that you could utilize.
Yeah, but he's asking whether you use loopholes. Everything has a loophole, but he's asking if you have external donors that campaign financing, is that a good, should it be allowed? And the reason for that is you do not want them exercising or having influence over your foreign policy of your country.
There's a lot of speculation because of the openness of free societies, right? That you have various nations and activities, I won't necessarily say what nations they are, that influence American politics. Not necessarily the politicians, but activists and ideologies, right? The whole idea is if they are quarreling amongst each other, they are divided and they are less effective with whatever foreign policy situations are going on. And to some extent, that might at least be partially true, because as strong as the American military is, Trump is kind of doing things that they're not technically prepared for or not fully prepared for. And the way how it shakes out, they might be forced to stop just because they're out of steam, right? No one wants to spend money on a military unless there's an actual purpose for it. And America was at a time of relative peace. And for whatever reason, things have taken a turn. Is Trump the chicken or Trump the egg? It kind of doesn't matter to me, right? Can similar things happen here, even though there's supposed to be laws against it? Yes, I do believe it is.
Let me just add this, sort of like closing up, sort of. I think what the call is asking is if our government position regarding matters which are very pro-United States, the zone of peace argument, kill them dead, all the arguments, the reader, all the positions that our Prime Minister seems to have taken, I think the caller is asking in relation to campaign, why we need campaign financing, because in the absence of campaign financing, could a government, whoever that government may be, influence the political directorate? And that is a very good question, a very salient question. I do not have the answer, but I had never even thought about it really. But it is noteworthy that among the groups that are not permitted, it's not a question how much. Some groups can contribute up to 50,000, but you have to disclose. Some groups can contribute and have to disclose if they got a government contract within the last 2 years. But they are saying that if you are a foreign government, you cannot, because your ability to influence domestic policy and your foreign policy, obviously, just the way that you could get the award of a contract, is the same way you can influence the political directorate to take a certain position because they are getting financial backing from a government. So I think it was a good question,
yeah.
And I think the legislation reflects that and is something of concern. I'm not saying it is so, but it is a matter of concern. Is that something that the campaign financing legislation, another reason why we need to pass that law?
All right, we do have another comment. Let's put it up. Let me take my licks. Let me take my lumps. Let me take my lumps. Morning, fix the collar. Yeah.
No, I have to fix my collar.
I think it's me.
Okay,
I think it's me.
We won't fight.
Yeah, no, because I think like one side was off today.
That is all you have to say? After all we said, you have
No. This was alien. That's
Oh.
why I believe it's me.
Oh,
this came
okay.
in, I think, before you even
Somebody
on
wants
here.
to tell me
Yeah,
what it is.
no. This was for me. This was for me. That's why I said, let me take my lumps.
God,
let me take your lumps. You know, when I don't cut my hair, when I don't fix my collar, let me take it. I'll just say though, people saw my collar and let me be on camera. I ain't gonna say anything more. But ultimately, it's my fault. It's my fault.
That's all the person has to say to us?
That's all this. Well, I don't know. It could have been all of the comments could have come from the same person. I don't know.
Don't worry, we appreciate it, because sometimes people want to say things and they don't say it.
No, but I mean, if someone wants to point out my color, then it was probably obvious to all the viewers. So I'm not gonna hide.
What do you want to do tomorrow? You want to fix your collar?
Well, I mean, it'll be a different shirt, so we'll see. All right, folks. Yeah, I am trying to be accountable, right, in my own way on this show. I have to be accountable to the viewers, and I also need to be thankful for Dabney for calling in. Thanks to the comments. Thank you, Karen, for joining me once again. This is a topic that's probably going to be underestimated, despite the fact that in all drum shops, people will say, oh, good, them Bally's house, but they got money, boy, it must be drugs. And people kind of only care about the issues for a laugh and not want to do anything about it. Hey, speak up, let your voice be heard.
Your MPs and call on the government to pass the campaign financing law. That's what you have to do. People's power.
I'll believe that law is a possibility when I see it. Until then, this is one issue that I am extremely pessimistic on. History says I have all rights to be. Folks, until then, stay safe. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. It's nice to be nice. Have a good day. We'll see you close out the week tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN Good morning and welcome back to Dollars and Cents. Now, on this episode in particular, I'll be talking about business insurance. And business insurance is an area or a topic that I take very seriously, and I think a lot of business people in Trinidad and Tobago, small business owners, don't see the importance in it. And to